What is language? Language involves many different things and can be analyzed from many different perspectives. The next paragraph is an example that I'll use as a point of focus for introducing language. Just before writing this sentence, I said the sentence, "The dog runs." I said it out loud in my apartment. I heard myself, and as far as I know, nobody else heard me. As far as I know, my voice wasn't recorded in any medium. Anybody listening to my reading of this text will have been hearing statements that were referring to the written text and not to the recording they're hearing until they got to this sentence. Anybody who read the preceding sentence in the written text will be reading a written sentence that talks about a corresponding spoken sentence that hadn't been said as of the time of its writing. The preceding paragraph illustrates some interesting features of natural language, including that natural language is multimedial, and that natural language is self-referential. When I say that natural language is self-referential, what I mean is that natural language can reference and discuss natural language. For example, this sentence talks about itself. Any sentence containing the phrase "this sentence" generally has the property of talking about itself. When I say that natural language is multimedial, what I mean is that language can exist in more than one medium. An English sentence like "the dog runs" can occur in spoken form as vibrations in the atmosphere, in written form as graphite or ink markings on a piece of paper, in written form as bits stored on a computer hard drive, in written form as light emanating from a computer monitor, in spoken form as analog electrical signals traveling through an audio cable, in spoken form as bits representing a digital audio signal in the form of light traveling through a fiber optic network cable, and so on and so forth. I can think the sentence "the dog runs," and I can do so in different ways. For example, I can mentally recite the sentence to myself, and I can do so in different voices. Or I can visualize the written sentence in my mind, and I can do so in different font styles. One interesting observation is that all of the items mentioned in the preceding paragraph can be called the sentence "the dog runs." E.g., I wrote the sentence "the dog runs" on a piece of paper, or anybody listening to a digital audio recording of this paragraph will hear the sentence "the dog runs." There is a logical difficulty with saying that all of these different items literally are the sentence "the dog runs." Suppose, for example, that we accept the following premises. 1. X is a spoken sentence. 2. X is the sentence "the dog runs." 3. Y is a written sentence. 4. Y is the sentence "the dog runs." From premises 2 and 4, we can infer that X is Y by the transitive property of the identity copula. By the identity copula, I mean the word "is," used in the sense of "is one and the same thing as in the sentence, "Earth is the third planet from the sun," and the sentence, "2 plus 2 is 4. The transitive property of the identity copula is the property that if A is B and B is C, then A is C. In this case, let A be X, C be Y, and B be the sentence "the dog runs." In this case, the property states that if X is the sentence "the dog runs," and Y is the sentence "the dog runs," then X is Y. Of course, is used in the preceding sentence in the sense of the identity copula, i.e. meaning one and the same as. The transitive property of the identity copula is perfectly analogous to the transitive property of equality in math. If you think that the equal sign in math is simply a way of writing the identity copula, then these two properties are the same property. Returning to premises 1 to 4, we have seen that they imply X is Y, at least if we interpret the "is" in premises 2 and 4 as being the identity copula. But X is a written sentence and Y is a spoken sentence. This contradicts the fact that no written sentence is a spoken sentence. This is the logical difficulty I wish to point to. What this argument implies is that we cannot accept all of premises 1 to 4, interpreting "is" as the identity copula in premises 2 and 4, and assuming that the transitive property of the identity copula is a true principle about the identity copula. So I'm going to reiterate the 4 premises at this point. 1. X is a spoken sentence. 2. X is the sentence "the dog runs." 3. Why is a written sentence? 4. Why is the sentence, the dog runs? So, what this argument implies is that we cannot accept all of premises 1 to 4. Premises 1 to 4 are plainly true according to common sense and common ways of speaking for appropriate values of x and y. As such, rejecting the idea that premises 1 to 4 are true for some x and some y is not an appealing option. Rejecting the transitive property of the identity copula also seems to be an unappealing option, because it as well seems obviously true. What's obviously false in this situation is that two different and distinct things, both of which we can call the sentence the dog runs, are one and the same thing. Common sense suggests that we should not interpret premises 1 to 4 in a way which leads immediately to a false conclusion. The remaining and most appealing way to do that, in my opinion, is to interpret is in premises 2 and 4 as something other than the identity copula. For example, is in premises 2 and 4 could be short for is an instantiation of, so that premises 2 and 4 literally mean x is an instantiation of the sentence the dog runs, and y is an instantiation of the sentence the dog runs. This gets rid of the logical contradiction. It is not the case that if x is an instantiation of z and y is an instantiation of z, then x is y, unless z has only one instantiation. However, quite plainly, sentences can have multiple instantiations. The solution to the puzzle leaves us with a new puzzle. What is the sentence the dog runs? Clearly we can point to many instantiations of the sentence the dog runs, but the solution we're considering prevents us from saying that any instantiation, or at least more than one instantiation, of the sentence the dog runs is itself the sentence the dog runs, since that would bring us back into our logical contradiction. If none of the instantiations of the sentence the dog runs are the sentence the dog runs, then what is the sentence the dog runs? Is it some sort of metaphysical entity, like a Platonic form, existing outside of space and time? So a different possible way of answering the puzzle that doesn't run into that particular difficulty is to deny that there is any object which we can literally call the sentence the dog runs. The structure of English grammar certainly suggests that there is an object we can call the sentence the dog runs, since the sentence the dog runs is a noun phrase which can be used to construct infinitely many meaningful statements about this sentence. As such, denying that there is any object which we can literally call the sentence the dog runs leaves me and many philosophers rather confused about the meaning of phrases like the sentence the dog runs. However, that doesn't make this way of answering wrong, and I'm not saying this way of answering is wrong. This puzzle is one of a variety of logical puzzles that have to do with language's self-referential capabilities. One we will discuss at more length later is the liar paradox. This is the puzzle concerning the sentence, "This sentence is false." Is the sentence true or false? You can reason that if it's true, then it's false, and if it's false, then it's true. The paradoxes of self-referential language are hard. I will talk about them at greater length in the section titled Paradoxes. So let's turn back to unpacking the notion of language. Consider again the sentence the dog runs. Let's consider the sequence of events that occurs when I say, the dog runs. First, I form a mental intention to say the sentence. Then, my brain sends signals which cause a sequence of events to occur in my body. My tongue is raised to touch my teeth, creating a barrier between the area above my tongue, which is contiguous with my respiratory system, and the empty space inside my mouth, which is contiguous with the outside atmosphere. My respiratory system pushes air out into my mouth, creating a pressure differential between those two areas. Because of its precise placement near my teeth, the tip of my tongue starts to vibrate against my teeth, creating a sound. I suddenly open up a gap between my tongue and my teeth, releasing the pressure differential and completing the word the. A similar sequence of physical occurrences completes the words dog runs. All of this bodily motion is achieved in humans through a powerful and precise muscular system, controlled by a sophisticated and fine-tuned nervous system. These mechanical events in my body cause vibrations in the atmosphere, like waves in a pool of water, which propagate according to the rules of fluid dynamics. Any objects in the nearby area of contiguous atmosphere are going to be disturbed by my speech, but usually only very slightly. Generally, the effects will be entirely negligible, except on objects which are specially sensitive to sound vibrations, such as human ears and microphones. The most interesting action happens when my speech irritates another human's ears while they are paying attention to it. This causes nerve signals to fire in their brain, which cause them to have an experience of meaning, whose content is partially controlled by precise variations in the patterns of sound vibrations I produce. Spoken language that is intelligible to a listener is a very special kind of complex of sound vibrations. Only very specifically shaped sounds constitute language that is intelligible to a given listener. Intelligible language is like a psychoactive drug in the following way. Psychoactive drugs affect the mental experiences of a person by being shaped in very specific ways which allow them to attach to neural receptors. Intelligible linguistic utterances affect the mental experience of a person by being shaped in very specific ways which allow them to attach to that person's inner mechanisms for synthesizing meaning. The synthesis of meaning by processing language is a reaction between two things, a piece of language and a person's psychology. A piece of language is a comparatively small, simple thing, whereas a person's psychology is an extremely complex thing. In addition, language is a highly observable and analyzable phenomenon, whereas human psychology seems to be mostly inscrutable, with all due respect to any psychologists who would disagree with this. My statement that psychology is mostly inscrutable means that unlike in many other domains, humans have been unable to produce a body of psychological theory which provides a rigorous, e.g. mathematical framework for modeling the psychological state of a person, or the features of their psychological state which are typically salient in problem-solving contexts, and allows for accurate forecasting of their likely behaviors. Let's break that down slightly. Call a domain of inquiry scrutable if humans are able to produce a body of theory about that domain which provides a rigorous, e.g. mathematical framework for modeling the states of objects in that domain, or the features of their states which are typically salient in problem-solving contexts, allowing for accurate forecasting of the object's behaviors. Then my statement that psychology is mostly inscrutable means that mostly it is not scrutable in the aforementioned sense. This statement does not assume that humans' behavior cannot be deterministically predicted. The statement that a domain of inquiry is scrutable does not assume that humans' behaviors can be deterministically predicted. This may be practically or conceptually impossible as far as I know. That's why I use the term forecast, suggesting a method that would provide a probability distribution, or something like that, of behaviors that a person is likely to exhibit looking forward in time, given their current psychological state and surrounding circumstances. So because I'm using the term forecast in this sense, the statement psychology is scrutable is not, I think, straightforwardly, commonsensically false, right? Like, if you think it's common sense that we can't predict humans' behavior in the same sense that we can predict the motions of solid bodies, right, via Newtonian physics, right? I'm not just saying that, right? I'm also saying the corpus of psychological theory out there doesn't even doesn't even provide a method for how do I put this? Doesn't even provide a method for predicting human behavior in the same way that meteorologists can predict the weather. Okay, so I've given a thesis about the limitations of present-day knowledge of psychology. My thesis is not that it's impossible for individual humans to achieve an understanding of human psychology which allows them to model salient features of a person's psychological state sufficiently to predict their likely behaviors, and to do this with many people in many situations, given sufficient information. My thesis describes a limitation on the psychological knowledge that, in my judgment, a person can straightforwardly gather from the available corpus of psychological research and pedagogy. So I do not assume that all readers will agree that psychology is mostly inscrutable in the sense I have described, although to be honest, I imagine most will agree or be willing to accept this thesis. Some of what follows depends on this thesis, and I have tried to make it clear when the argument I am making depends on the thesis that psychology is mostly inscrutable. The following paragraph is an example of a place where I invoke this thesis. The arguable inscrutability of psychology infects all attempts to study linguistic meaning from a psychological perspective. It is debatable whether any totally non-psychological theory can justifiably be called a theory of linguistic meaning. However, there is some appeal to such theories. If it were possible to describe the relationship of meaning as a relationship which obtains between language and the world, e.g., a noun phrase refers to an object and a statement describes the state of affairs in the world, then it might be possible to describe the relationship of meaning simply and rigorously, without involving the messiness of humans. What's not necessarily clear is that this can be done. Let's explore. A distinction that sheds light on some of the issues I have just raised is the distinction between three types of linguistic meaning: sentence meaning, speaker meaning, and listener meaning. According to proponents of the concept of sentence meaning, every sentence has a sentence meaning, which is what that sentence means in itself according to the conventions of the language. In addition, every meaningful linguistic utterance has a speaker meaning, which is what the speaker meant by the utterance. Finally, whenever a listener listens to an utterance, there is a listener meaning specific to that listener, which is what it meant to them, or what they thought it meant. Proponents of the sentence meaning-speaker meaning distinction often think that the sentence meaning of a sentence can be determined by applying some sort of recursive algorithm over the grammar of the sentence, finding the meanings of the smallest meaningful fragments of the sentence, e.g. the words, and iteratively building up the meanings of larger sentence fragments until one has the whole sentence. Such analysis of meaning can be done with some variety of success on artificial formal languages, such as computer programming languages. And with some variety of success on natural languages as well, I should say. The field of formal semantics is the modern successor of early efforts, such as Wittgenstein's, to develop concepts of sentence meaning along these lines. Whether there is such a thing as sentence meaning for natural languages such as English is debatable. One can define notions of sentence meaning for simple artificial languages with precise rules of sentence formation. However, nobody can give a complete definition of sentence meaning for English, because the complexity of English is vast and constantly increasing. If you wanted a definition of sentence meaning for English, I think you'd need to pay a whole team of philosophers to maintain and update it, and it wouldn't never work for every English sentence. Moreover, if there were sufficient demand for such a definition of sentence meaning to fund such an enterprise, it's likely there would be multiple competing enterprises with conflicting definitions of English sentence meaning. The whole exercise would lack any clear point. In each case, what you'd get would arguably be not the one true notion of sentence meaning, but just that shop's opinion on how English sentence meaning should be defined. Thus, if we imagine the scenario where we had an actual definition of sentence meaning for English, we are led to think that we would likely have more than one definition for the notion of sentence meaning for English. Defenders of a single true notion of sentence meaning for English will probably have to say that the one true notion of sentence meaning is out there in the sky somewhere, never to be seen in full by us humans, and that people who pursue the concept of English sentence meaning must content themselves with doing their best to use reason to find the truth about English sentence meaning. It's unclear to me whether a descriptivist about English, by which I mean somebody who agrees that English has no centralized authority regarding rules of usage, and at the end of the day people can use English however they want, can coherently maintain the position that there is a single true notion of English sentence meaning out there in the sky. Probably most readers are skeptical of the idea that there is a single true notion of English sentence meaning. We are left with the possibility of multiple definitions or concepts of English sentence meaning. In addition, we are left with the concepts of speaker meaning, what speakers mean, and listener meaning, what listeners think speakers mean, or what they take from statements by speakers. However, there is still a conventional notion of the conventional meanings of sentences that are sufficiently literal that they are not open to much variety of reasonable interpretation. Let us call this the conventional notion of literal sentence meaning. The conventional notion of literal sentence meaning does not refer to one exactly defined notion of sentence meaning. Rather, the phrase is open to interpretation, and its meaning will vary according to context and according to the views of the participants in a conversation where the phrase is used. The phrase can be used in conversations where it serves a useful purpose in advancing the conversation. The phrase can be used in a conversation if participants in the conversation are sufficiently comfortable with using the phrase, and they are comfortable that a shared understanding of the phrase exists, which is sufficiently robust to solve the conversational problems at hand. I will discuss meaning more extensively in the section titled Meaning. Speaking very broadly, there are three big things to study about language: syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. Syntax, as I shall define it, is the study of language in itself, i.e., the study of the physical artifacts and phenomena which we call language, the spoken word, the written word, and so forth. The field of syntax doesn't study the people who use language. It just studies and forms theories of the structure of linguistic utterances and artifacts themselves. Semantics, as I shall define it, is the study of the meaning of language. As we have seen in our discussion so far, and as we will see some more in the section titled Meaning, linguistic meaning is a highly difficult and opaque topic, presenting deep intellectual challenges. Pragmatics, as I shall define it, is the study of language in the context of its usage by people. These three fields are probably not entirely disjoint, and they don't cover everything there is to discuss about language. There is the history of language and the biology of language, for example. However, they are a good way of subdividing the space of topics related to language that we are going to cover. More broadly, the mature philosophical approaches to studying language that I'm aware of are subsumed under these categories. The preceding paragraphs serve as an extremely high-level introduction to some of the central issues in the philosophy of language, and as an introduction to the study of language as a whole. In the rest of this text, we will focus our study of language into specific topics which directly pertain to winning arguments. The reader is encouraged to learn every important lesson they can about language. If one learns to use language well, there is a great deal one can do with that.